Chapter 356. Disaster and fortune come hand in hand. Han Li calmly walked out from the Stardust Pavilion a quarter hour later. He turned his head to look at the huge pavilion with a faint, mysterious smile on his face before continuing on with long strides. Han Li currently had the red thread shadow chaser needles and a jade slip containing the true essence pill formula inside his storage pouch. Moments ago, he had casually asked about the selling price of 1,000-year-old spiritual medicine. Instead of taking out any herbs, he took out 2 boxes each containing a face-setting pill created from 1,000-year-old herbs and handed it over to the young woman. Han Li vividly remembered the fervent expression of the usually aloof woman when he told her about the face-setting pill's miraculous effect of an unchanging appearance. The sharp contrast with her usual expression had surprised him by no small measure. Soon after, the young woman called over a pill refinement expert from the Stardust Pavilion to personally confirm the claims. However, none of them had refined such a pill before. In the end, she brought the 2 medicine pills to the 5th floor's Madame Lan to verify the legitimacy of the face-setting pills, as well as their miraculous effect of preserving one's appearance. After a whispered discussion, the women decided that Han Li could pay for the pill formula and the magic tool set with the 2 face-setting pills along with 1,000 spirit stones. Now that he thought about it, he felt it was quite funny. Being able to eternally preserve one's appearance was a matter that proved extremely enticing and irresistible to women. Even such a clever schemer with such deep cultivation as Madame Lan revealed the same fervent expression as the young woman upon hearing Han Li say the words face-setting pill. As a result, Han Li came to a complete understanding about how greatly women cared about their appearance. However, the amount that Han Li had acquired for the face-setting pills had far exceeded his estimations. He had originally believed that the pills would get him 2,000 spirit stones at most. Therefore, their offer had left Han Li completely satisfied. Naturally, he didn't attempt to haggle over the price and ignore their generous offer. It was quite fortunate that the 2 shopkeepers were women. Were it a male shopkeeper, he would have been quite lucky to get a few hundred spirit stones for them. After he finished the trade, Madame Lan couldn't help but ask about the medicine pill's origin after recovering from her earlier fervor. Han Li thoughtlessly replied, it was an unintentional discovery, before making himself scarce. As Han Li walked out of the Stardust Pavilion, he felt some reluctance. He knew that since the Stardust Pavilion was able to take out such rarities as pill formulas and the red thread shadow chaser needles, they were certain to have even more precious items. It was a pity that he wasn't able to take out more medicine pills and spiritual herbs for trade, as Han Li clearly understood the dangers of openly revealing one's wealth. With regret lingering in his heart, Han Li found an inn that accommodated cultivators and decided to stay there. For the remainder of the day, Han Li started to meditate and refine qi, preparing for the next day when he would have Store Owner Shu refine his magic tools. On the morning of the second day, Han Li arrived at the tool refinement store in accordance with the appointed time. Store Owner Shu had been waiting for him for quite a while. Once he saw Han Li, he immediately called out to him in excitement, urging him to enter the rear courtyard. Han Li gave a slight smile and entered. Half a month later, Han Li finally emerged from the store. But this time, he appeared to be the opposite of how he entered and wore a darkened expression as if he were in an exceptionally foul mood. Store Owner Shu closely followed behind him with a face full of shame. He was muttering something to Han Li as he followed him. Han Li then released a long and heavy sigh, which somewhat alleviated his foul mood. Soon after, he spoke to Store Owner Shu in an amiable tone before slowly walking out of the market city, leaving behind the old man in a daze. A short while later, Han Li had left the territory of the market city and flew toward Shinruian's small, nameless mountain. While Han Li stood on the divine wind boat, his expression became sullen once more as he thought of the repeated tool refinement failures in the past half-month. He had overestimated the tool refinement technique of that shop owner Shu, resulting in the almost complete destruction of those precious materials just to make one magic tool set. As for the mantis materials that he had valued the greatest, they had been entirely lost in the refining process. Han Li became extremely regretful after the fact and felt an urge to ruthlessly strike down shop owner Shu. But in the end, when he saw the old man's great display of shame, he decided to let the matter drop. Even when he departed, he had consoled the old man in an amiable manner. Sighing from what had happened, Han Li patted his storage pouch. 5 white, flawless flying knives flew out from the storage pouch and continuously spiraled around Han Li. After seeing the 5 knives magic tool set that was refined from the white spider's legs, Han Li's mood improved slightly. Not only were 3 of the legs destroyed, but the white spider's shell that he intended to refine into armor had also been lost. But what he truly hadn't expected was that the entirety of the huge mantis materials would be completely wasted. This could be considered a great misfortune born from great fortune. Han Li could only think about this with a bitter smile. But this experience taught Han Li that the rarer and more superior the materials, the greater the skill that was required to refine them into magic tools. Even the same person who had refined the inky flood dragon's materials with great success was not enough. During his flight, Han Li appeared to have entered deep contemplation. Several days later, he had once again arrived above a small, nameless mountain. This time, Han Li didn't need to use a voice transmission talisman. The formation spell had automatically opened a passage for Han Li. Han Li smiled. It seemed that Xin Ruian had been waiting for his return. After all, the agreed date had nearly arrived. After a short moment, Han Li was sitting down in a chair in a bamboo room. Wearing plain clothes, Xin Ruian sat across from him with a smile. Xin Ruian took out a jade slip and handed it to Han Li. With a gentle expression, she said, "Senior Han, your arrival is quite timely. Yesterday, I just finished restoring the ancient transportation formation. So long as Senior restores the formation in accordance with the design, the ancient transportation formation will be functional." From her point of view, restoring the ancient transportation formation proved to be quite challenging, and she was quite happy with her recent success. Han Li reached out for the jade talisman. He was extremely happy and had even revealed a rarely seen undisguised smile. Although he didn't intend to immediately make use of the transportation formation, it was bound to be a good backup plan. Han Li submerged his spiritual sense into the jade slip to take a look. As he expected, he saw detailed and complete instructions on the ancient formation's restoration. "Thank you for your trouble, young lady Xin." Han Li didn't drag his thanks into a long-winded speech. Instead, he sincerely said a few words of thanks and carefully put the jade slip away. "It was nothing. I personally held much interest in this ancient transportation formation." Xin Ruian replied with a faint smile. Soon after, she thought of something and took out a small, exquisite storage pouch and handed it over to Han Li. She unhurriedly spoke, "I only have another year or 2 to live at most. These are sets of formation flags and plates that elder brother Qi and I refined together. Since I won't be able to use them, I'll give them to Senior Han as a present. I hope it proves useful in assisting Senior Han with his future cultivation." Seeing that Xin Ruian had given such an impressive gift with such light words, Han Li was left stunned. At that point, he took a deep look at her. After a short moment of silence, he took the storage pouch into his hands and solemnly said, "Although I, Han Li, am not an honorable, kind-hearted, or chivalrous hero, I will promise Xin Ruian once more that as long as I have the strength, I will thoroughly extinguish the Fu clan from the cultivation world without doubt." Xin Ruian smiled in response. The purpose of her large gift had been achieved. The more reluctant someone was to make a pledge, the more sincerely they would attempt to uphold it. "If Senior doesn't have any pressing matters, he can stay at my humble abode for a few days. I do hope to have a chat with Senior Han about the Tao of formation spells." 3 days later, Han Li left the nameless mountain on his divine wind boat and arrived at White Pond Mountain, a nearby gathering place for cultivators. Rogue cultivators and cultivator clan members would often gather here to exchange information of the cultivation world and conduct trade as well. Han Li came in order to hear how much the situation had deteriorated in the state of Yu and whether or not the 7 sects were able to make a turnaround. Only after acquiring this information would Han Li be able to decide on his next plan of action. The day of the next cultivator gathering had nearly arrived. White Pond Mountain wasn't far from Xin Ruian's nameless mountain, and she and Xianxia had previously went there several times. Naturally, a small meeting such as this would mostly have Qi condensation cultivators. Only rarely would Foundation establishment cultivators appear here. 1 day later, Han Li arrived at the base of the so-called White Pond Mountain. This mountain was quite large and had 3 peaks. The tallest and most rugged location, the West Peak, was where the meeting would be hosted. Han Li turned into a streak of white light as he shot toward the mountain peak. Chapter 357. White Pond Mountain. The west peak of White Pond Mountain was slightly larger than Han Li had imagined. Not only was there an ancient Buddhist temple on the mountain peak, there were also more than 10 stone kiosks of varying sizes, each with a group of several cultivators chatting around them. Naturally, there were a few straggling cultivators that wandered about the kiosks and the temple. It seemed that they were those who had impatiently arrived early for the White Pond Mountains meeting. Han Li observed the mountain peak from the air for a moment before spiraling down and landing in an obscure corner. Soon after, Han Li walked to the nearby stone kiosks with Crooked Soul in tow. Because of Han Li's powerful spiritual sense, he was soon able to clearly hear the whispered discussions of the cultivators within the kiosks. One of the whispered conversations in particular captured Han Li's attention. Han Li focused on this 4-person conversation and discovered that they were talking about the war situation between the 7 sects of Yu and the Devil Dao. His interest was roused, and he walked over without further hesitation. This was a great victory for the Devil Dao. Not only were the 6 sects of the state of Yu forced to flee from their homeland, catastrophe will also befall the state of Zijin and our very own state of Yuanwu. A pale middle-aged man sighed deeply after speaking. That's right. In the last great battle, the 6 sects' power had suffered great losses. The 2 countries that had fought alongside them also lost 60% of their forces as well. The Heavenly Star sect and the other sects are now facing great pressure. A youth about 20 years old spoke with Schadenfreude. Among the other 3 in the discussion, 2 old men had unchanged expressions and didn't reply. As for the middle-aged man who had just spoken, he couldn't help but bitterly laugh, wanting to say something in response. But at that moment, he was interrupted by someone's voice from the side. While it is true that the Heavenly Star sect finds itself in a dilemma along with the other great sects, the lives of us rogue cultivators and those from cultivator clans will also soon take a turn for the worse. Those of the Devil Dao espouse the belief that the strong should feed on the weak. When that time comes, we definitely won't be able to enjoy free and easygoing lives. Han Li slowly walked in and spoke the words that the middle-aged man intended to say. When the 4 realized that an outsider was nearby, they were startled and immediately grew silent. But when they were unable to perceive Han Li's cultivation, they all revealed a trace of worry and respectfully saluted Han Li. The middle-aged man then hurriedly rushed to exonerate the youth. "Senior, my honorable nephew spoke without thinking. He doesn't hold the slightest disrespect toward the sects. I hope Senior won't take offense." These people had unexpectedly presumed Han Li to be a high-grade cultivator from the state of Yuanwu's cultivation clans. The youth who had just spoken appeared especially nervous. He, fellow Taoists are mistaken. I am but a rogue cultivator. I was only casually adding on to the conversation. Han Li smiled and warmly explained. The 4 relaxed upon hearing Han Li's words. Although they didn't know whether Han Li was truly a rogue cultivator, they clearly understood he wouldn't be pursuing the rash words that had been previously spoken. Thus, they gave Han Li a respectful welcome. Han Li then took a seat next to the stone table within the kiosk. Us juniors are truly honored to have Senior here. However, why would Senior partake in such a lowly exchange of this degree? An old man with a red-flushed face cautiously asked. It was obvious why this man was amazed. A small meeting place like White Pond Mountain would normally find it difficult to attract foundation establishment cultivators. If such high-grade cultivators wanted to converse, they would normally seek out a higher-class gathering spot. First was due to time, as I came here from a desolate mountain where I was cultivating. Recently, I've heard news that the cultivators from my country, the state of Yu, had suffered a huge loss. I felt that the cultivation world was about to undergo great changes, so I thought I'd discreetly look for information. Do you fellow Taoists have the latest information on the Devil Dao and the state of Yu? Han Li gave a simplified explanation. The 4 looked at each other for a moment before 3 of them focused their attention on the shriveled old man among them. The most well-informed is naturally our eldest brother Ding. After all, the Ding clan possesses many secular properties in the state of Yu. The red-faced old man quickly said. The other 2 simultaneously agreed, causing Han Li's eyes to flash with a queer expression. Old Man Ding expressed some embarrassment in response. He helplessly said, "Our Ding clan members in the state of Yu have indeed given us information on recent circumstances. Of course, the clan doesn't wish for this information to spread, but since you are all my close friends and this senior also wishes to know, I can talk about it. However, I hope you all won't easily make this information known." The other three couldn't help but grow excited and repeatedly praise him. Even Han Li gently nodded his head. The old man lightly sighed and slowly spoke, "I've just received this information a few days ago. Currently, the state of Yu is in great turmoil. Although the Devil Dao had defeated the 6 sects' allied armies, a large amount of the 6 sects' cultivators have broken off from their retreat out of the state of Yu and have been incessantly launching guerrilla raids utilizing their familiarity of the terrain. I've heard that there were also a few core formation cultivators who haven't retreated, thus keeping the Devil Dao busy. After all, core formation cultivators aren't so easily dealt with. In addition, as the 6 sects have existed in the state of Yu for so many years, they possessed a lot of hidden power and have been causing the Devil Dao's takeover of the state of Yu to be rather troublesome. As for the state of Yu's cultivation clans, they have divided into 3 factions. One faction turned traitor once the 6 sects were defeated. They took the initiative to surrender and pay allegiance to the Devil Dao. Another faction consisted of those that were too closely tied with the 6 sects. Fearing that the Devil Dao would want to take revenge, they fled the state of Yu as the 6 sects had. As for the last faction, they are waiting to see how things will develop before taking action. As for the 6 sects' long-established key locations, those from the Masked Moon sect and Giant Sword sect have yet to be broken through by the Devil Dao. The other 4 sects have been completely broken through, but it was said that very little had been obtained from the attacks. A majority of the rare items had already been removed by the 6 sects' disciples. The way I see it, every day the Devil Dao isn't able to pacify the state of Yu is another day where the state of Yuanwu or Zijin isn't attacked. After all, their numbers are great and they were able to simultaneously take down 2 small countries and a mid-rank country in one fell swoop. Since it is only a matter of time before they will fall upon us, they have no problem dealing with the disruptive 6 sect cultivators for the time being. The old man's slowly spoken words had revealed his own take on the matter. The red-faced old man couldn't help but interrupt and ask, "Eldest brother Ding, why do you think that the Devil Dao has given us time to breathe, allowing for our country's sects to prepare for their attack?" This is hard to say. After all, I am only aware of the surface information. As for the absolute truth of the matter, I'm afraid that only the highest echelons of the sects know. Old Man Ding slowly shook his head and stole a glance at Han Li. It was obvious that he believed Han Li to be a cultivator from a sect of his own country and had refrained from speaking of certain matters. Old Man Ding didn't wish to continue speaking of that issue and suddenly said something with a smile that left Han Li shocked instead. Because the 6 sects of the state of Yu wished for a hasty retreat, they used the strategy of cutting off their own tail. They only brought along their talented elite disciples while leaving behind the rest of their many disciples as ignorant sacrifices. It is said that the ones who most effectively applied this cruel tactic were the highest echelons of Yellow Maple Valley's disciples. They had their trusted elite make a smooth escape from the state of Yu while sacrificing 2 whole groups of disciples, nearly all of their cultivators apart from those that escaped. TSK. Their methods are truly impressive. Although the old man said this indifferently, Han Li's heart suddenly sunk, and his face became faintly twisted. But fortunately, the others didn't dare to stare at Han Li for long, so none of them noticed this change. Strongly suppressing his astonishment, Han Li calmly asked, "Fellow Daoist Ding, you said that Yellow Maple Valley sacrificed 2 batches of disciples. How did this happen? I am quite interested." Since Senior is asking, Junior will naturally answer truthfully. "I heard that when the upper echelon of the state of Yu received the news of their frontline's defeat, Yellow Maple Valley immediately plotted to make a crafty escape. They would first have a group of disciples rush to evacuate but secretly divulge this information to the spies of the Devil Dao, claiming that the group contained their elite disciples. This group would also bring along a large amount of spirit stones and materials, completely attracting the attention of the Devil Dao soldiers. At the same time, they left behind another group of ignorant disciples and had them use the Great Formation to confront the Devil Dao. With these 2 groups drawing the enemy's full attention, Yellow Maple Valley's highest echelon then had the true trusted elite disciples retreat in the opposite direction with the sect's 1,000 years' worth of savings. I heard that although the number of people to safely retreat from Yellow Maple Valley was the fewest, they had the smoothest retreat. As for the other 5 sects, although they retreated en masse, they encountered repeated attacks and had to fight for their lives on many occasions. Much of their valuables have fallen into the Devil Dao's hands as a result. This matter then became widely spread throughout the state of Yu by the Devil Dao. Not daring to slight Han Li, the old man gave him a complete explanation. Han Li's expression remained unchanged as he spoke unhurriedly with a soft voice. "Oh, so it was like that. Those abandoned Yellow Maple Valley disciples sure were foolish." Chapter 358. The Endless Sea. The Mulan Han Li then suddenly spoke with a gentle smile. "Well then, knowing that the state of Yu is currently in turmoil is enough for me." These incomprehensible words left the four with a feeling of profound mystery. They could only force themselves to give him a smile in return. Han Li stood up and said amiably, "You can all go ahead and continue chatting. I am going to go to a different room." "As you please, Senior." "Best wishes, Senior." The four hastily saw off Han Li with respect. Han Li casually beckoned with his arm and called out to Crooked Soul, who had stood outside throughout the conversation. They then walked together to another stone kiosk. 4 hours later, Han Li stood at a corner of the mountain peak and lowered his head in contemplation. He had participated in many discussions about the current affairs of the state of Yu. As a result, he had come to the conclusion that the current situation in the state of Yu could only be described as chaotic. Under these circumstances, he only had 2 options. One was to use a flying magic tool and fly to a country far away from the state of Yu, in order to find a place suitable for cultivation. The other option was to restore the ancient transportation formation and take a gamble to see where the transportation formation would take him. After all, this precious ancient transportation formation was built underground for a reason. It was certain to be linked to a distant location. At first glance, he felt that he should obviously choose the first option as it was more reliable. But after some consideration, Han Li felt that it was just as risky. To the east and west of the state of Yu were the Devil Dao's state of Qianluo and the Righteous Dao Alliance's state of Fengdou. As a result, he would only be able to head north or south. If he were to flee north of Yuanwu, there would be several tens of small and mid-ranked countries, but Han Li knew that their cultivators wouldn't be able to resist the attacks of either the Devil or Righteous Dao. Some of them had even attached themselves to the 2 great powers, becoming their puppets and occasionally engaging in both open and covert struggles with the other side. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for the state of Qianluo and Fengdou to conduct a wide-scale turf war, especially since they originally only had a small stretch of common border with one another. Those countries would soon be turned into battlefields by the Devil Dao and Righteous Dao Alliance, and Han Li naturally wouldn't be able to stay there. But if he were to brave the dangers of traveling through these countries and continue north, he would arrive at the Heavenly South region's northmost area, the Endless Seas, where few cultivators dared to travel. Not only was this sea extremely dark, it was also limitless and had many rare species of fishes living within. The fishes were extremely violent and were no less vicious than their high-grade demon beast counterparts on land. Even core formation cultivators would find themselves in extreme danger if they fell into the sea. The thought of flying across the sea was but a mere fantasy. There was once a nascent soul cultivator who was curious about the end of the sea. After preparing fully, he then flew over the ocean water. After flying for over a year, he was still unable to see any end of the sea and hadn't seen the slightest hint of land. At that point, over half of his medicine pills and spirit stones had been exhausted, and he could only resentfully turn back. Otherwise, he would only be able to die at sea when he ran out of spiritual power, even if he was a nascent soul cultivator. Naturally, Han Li wouldn't indulge himself in the fantasy of crossing the sea. His only thoughts were to head down south. South of the state of Yu, after passing through the state of Zijin and then another 6 countries, one would arrive at the 9 Nations Union, an inseparably close alliance of 9 countries of various sizes. This alliance between the 9 countries was formed mostly for the purpose of combating their fearsome invaders, the Mulan race's spell soldiers. When speaking of the Mulan race and their magic soldiers, one wouldn't be able to avoid mentioning the Mulan Prairies, home of the Mulan tribes and a close neighbor of the Nine Nations Union. The Mulan race were completely different from the Yang people of the states of Yuanwu and Yu. Their people were completely nomadic, possessing a culture of fearlessness and a love for brandishing their sabers and spears. The Mulan race were made up of countless tribes of various sizes, where small tribes would consist of several 100,000 people and the large tribes would number several tens of millions. Cultivators also existed within these tribes, but they were called spell warriors instead of cultivators. It is said that they are indistinguishable from common cultivators, and the divisions of cultivation as well as the cultivation techniques are extremely similar. The only thing that differed were that the spell warriors of core formation rank and higher didn't care much about external items such as magic tools and talismans. Instead, they were focused on mastering their elemental Daoist magics to perfection. They even had secret earthborn techniques where they merged with the prairie. Their research had produced a variety of extremely strange and formidable magic techniques, and in turn created a new school of magic techniques that distinguished the Mulan, which they called spirit techniques. By relying on these incisive spirit techniques, the Mulan race's spell warriors were able to contend and even gain the upper hand against cultivators of equivalent rank. As the Mulan race's spell warriors grew increasingly numerous, their need for spirit vein locations and spirit stones intensified to the point of significantly worsening the depletion of cultivation resources. This shortage was further exacerbated by the extreme lack of natural cultivation resources in the Mulan Prairie. As a result, the Mulan race's spell warriors had their gazes set upon the abundant spiritual qi and resources of the 9 countries for as long as anybody could remember. They had often launched attacks against these countries in order to seize their spirit veins, spirit stone mines, and other such resources vital to cultivators. Naturally, the cultivation world of the 9 countries were unwilling to allow their resources to be seized by these savage cultivators. In the end, a bloody war of magic had erupted. In the beginning, the 9 countries had individually resisted, but they had quickly suffered defeat at the hands of the united armies of the Mulan tribes, surrendering a large portion of their resources and land. Having now experienced the ferociousness of the Mulan, they learned from their defeat and hastily formed the 9 Nations Union. By using underhanded and deplorable methods, they were able to gradually defeat the Mulan race's spell warriors and retake their land. But having just tasted victory, the Mulan tribes were naturally unwilling to simply give up. After endless years of strife and warfare, mutual hatred had bloomed within both sides. The death toll had grown to such a degree that even the mortals of Mulan and Yang had been influenced. As of now, the people of Mulan didn't dare to set foot within the borders of the 9 countries. Likewise, those of Yang didn't dare to travel too deeply into the Mulan prairies. As for how many people there are in the Mulan tribes, nobody truly knows. The Mulan prairie was far too large, and the 9 Nations Union had only tangled with a small portion of the Mulan tribes. Although the Mulan Prairie wasn't endless like the Black Devil Sea, it was said to require 5 years for someone to travel from one end of the prairie to the other end. Furthermore, Mulan Prairies was just a name given by the Mulan tribes. At the other end of the prairie lay the Mulan tribe's true enemy, the Soaring tribes. The Soaring tribes were another nomadic tribe, who called these grasslands the Heaventide Prairies. This was due to their long-held beliefs in their patron god, the Heaventide beast. There was no reason for 2 nomadic tribes to live on the same prairie, and the 2 ethnicities had formed a relationship of fatal enmity. It was unknown for how long their soldiers and cultivators had been fighting one another. In any case, a huge battle was certain to take place every 100 years or so at the center of the prairie. 10 million mortal soldiers would fight, while tens of thousands of cultivators battled throughout the sky. Naturally, the ultimate victor would be decided by the battle in the sky. Han Li had learned all of this from rumors and ancient records of all kinds. It was said that at the other end of the Mulan Prairie existed an incredibly huge great empire. The entire Heavenly South region wasn't even as large as a tenth of it. Han Li found those rumors hard to believe and had difficulty imagining a country that was over 10 times larger than the entire Heavenly South region. Of course, all this had nothing to do with Han Li's current plans. They were just random thoughts that had rushed through his mind. After he set aside his wandering thoughts, he eventually came to the conclusion that the 6-sex evacuation wouldn't end within the nearby countries. They would definitely make a detour to the 9 Nations Union. After all, The cultivators of the 9 countries had battles with the Mulan spell warriors every other year and a war every 10 years. They would definitely welcome the 6 sects and provide them with great assistance. Naturally, the spirit veins and other such locations of value allocated to them would depend on their abilities. If Han Li were to return to Yellow Maple Valley, he would just continue to be cannon fodder. This meant he definitely couldn't head south. Although he had already come to a clear answer on what he should do, he received a great headache once he thought about it again. First, he would see whether or not he could restore the transportation formation. If he managed to successfully repair it, he would then reconsider whether or not he would use it. At best, I could return if I'm dissatisfied. At worst, well, this option did hold a certain degree of danger after all. Han Li thought with a bitter smile. Chapter 359. A surprising encounter with an acquaintance. Having come to a decision, Han Li silently flew off the mountain. Later on, when the White Pond Mountains meeting convened, those Qi condensation cultivators that had spoken with Han Li would be left baffled by his absence. Han Li first went to the Heavenly Star Sex Market City to purchase the list of items that he would need to restore the ancient transportation formation. Then, he hurried off to the State of Yu. This time, Han Li didn't take the direct route to enter the State of Yu. Instead, he circled around to a remote part of the border between the state of Yuanwu and Yu and stealthily entered through there. Now that the State of Yu belonged to the Devil Dao, he took steps to avoid entering dangerous territories to prevent having enemies pursuing him the entire way. But Han Li didn't know that because of this precaution, he had unexpectedly avoided a crisis. Currently, the majority of the State of Yu's borders were heavily patrolled. If Han Li had recklessly returned using his original path, he would have been unable to escape their attention, most likely leading to an unavoidable pursuit and battle. Having safely entered the State of Yu, Han Li hastily journeyed on routes through the most desolate areas he could find, allowing him to arrive at the Spirit Stone Mine near the transportation formation unnoticed. Han Li stealthily observed the Spirit Stone Mine from far away, as it had now fallen into the hands of the Devil Dao. He saw Devil Dao disciples wearing green and white clothing with either a dark green ghost skull or a pink peach blossom tucked within the corners of their sleeves. It seemed they were cultivators from the Ghost Spirit sect and the Harmonious Bond sect. Now knowing that the Spirit Stone Mine was being guarded, Han Li stealthily slipped away and entered a nearby secret underground entrance. He was able to easily find the concealed cave he had previously collapsed. After using his magic tools to tear the stone away, Han Li was able to take another look at the damaged ancient transportation formation. He let out a sigh of relief upon seeing the ancient transportation formation safe and sound. During the following day, Han Li first used his newly acquired illusion formation flags to thoroughly conceal the secret location. Afterwards, he laid down the formation flags and formation plates of the 5 elements reversal formation, laying out a thorough defense for the cave containing the ancient transportation formation. This way, he would have enough time to easily escape, even if he was discovered by the Devil Dao cultivators. Freed from worry, Han Li started the transportation formation's restoration. The Jade Talisman clearly stated that restoring the ancient transportation formation required the utmost precision. Even the slightest slant of an unremarkable talisman line could result in an error in the transportation formation. After spending an entire 7 days, Han Li had only managed to complete less than half of the restoration. But that night, Han Li encountered a huge problem. He had already ran out of the supplies he had bought earlier. Han Li was flabbergasted. He had originally bought a bit more than what was mentioned on the item list, but he hadn't accounted for the wasted materials from the mistakes he would make while repairing the formation. He was neither a tool refinement nor a formation spellmaster. As he was lacking in skill, he had wasted over half of his materials from errors and didn't have enough left to finish. Han Li sighed. It seemed he'd have to go on another trip. However, he remembered that a small market town of some cultivator clan lay several days east of the Spirit Stone Mine. Although it wasn't large, items such as source iron and crystal jade could be found there. Since the core of the transportation formation wasn't ruined, he would only require a few common materials to repair it. His only worry was that given the current chaos of the cultivation world, this clan's market city might no longer exist. If this were the case, he'd have to travel to a more dangerous area. Under the cover of night, Han Li flew out of the cave and headed directly toward the market city. He had already decided that if the market city no longer existed, it would be best to return to the state of Yuanwu. He couldn't afford to just ignore the fact that the ancient formation was only half repaired. To be safe, Han Li planned to only travel during the night. During the day he would find areas to rest and recover, keeping the danger to a minimum. In this way, Han Li continued to fly east under the cover of night. Whenever rays of sunlight began to appear off the horizon, he would search for a place to rest. But while he was gazing down from above, his expression suddenly changed, and he quickly turned his head in another direction. Han Li faintly felt as if someone was quickly flying toward him and that they weren't alone. Han Li reacted instantly by stomping on his divine wind boat and flew downward. In the blink of an eye, he had disappeared into the darkness of night. Just as he concealed himself and restrained his spiritual qi, a blinding light silently flashed by him like a bolt of lightning. Then a bloody cloud about 10 meters wide relentlessly chased after it, releasing unending ghostly wails and howls as it flew past. A bit behind the cloud was a pink ray of light that released soft, clear cries which seemed to also be in relentless pursuit. Han Li, who was hidden in the mountain forest below, didn't pay attention to the white light, focusing on the bloody cloud instead. He felt that the bloody cloud seemed extremely familiar. Wasn't that the demonic art which had protected the young master of the Ghost Spirit sect? Having remembered the Ghost Spirit sect's young master's ferociousness and the hardships he had been put through, Han Li's expression became gloomy. While Han Li was still in thought, those in the sky had hastily descended, and the white light in front suddenly stopped. The brilliant light then quickly faded away, revealing a white-clothed woman standing on a flying sword. This woman had a slender body and was wearing a cloak. As soon as she appeared, she coldly spoke to her pursuers. "Juniors, it appears you are unwilling to let me go. Could it be that you have a death wish?" The woman's voice was cold and beautiful. When Han Li heard it, he nearly jumped in surprise. Greatly shocked, Han Li thought to himself, Is this Fairy Nangong's voice? Is it really her?" Although he had barely spoken with this woman, after he had slept with her, she had become the most important woman in Han Li's life. The memory of her had always remained clear in his heart. Also, while the voice sounded very much like Nangong Wan, its hoarseness left him slightly doubtful. While Han Li was lost in astonishment, the bloody mist and that pink light had both stopped about 40 meters away in response to her threats. The bloody and pink lights then faded away, revealing the people inside. The bloody cloud revealed the Ghost Spirit sect's young master Wang Chan as expected, and the pink light revealed a man and woman that left Han Li dumbstruck. He had last seen both at Yangling Castle. One was a demonic man as beautiful as a woman. As for the woman, she had been missing for a long time and was assumed to have fallen into the grasp of the devil Dao, Dong Xianxia. Martial aunt Hong Fu is her great-aunt. She appears in chapter 244 and is with Han Li throughout the Yang Clan Castle's arc. Dong Xianxia wore a cold expression and appeared rather dignified. Her originally seductive appearance had completely disappeared at some point in the past. But what surprised Han Li more was that she had already cultivated to mid-foundation establishment from early foundation establishment. When Han Li saw Dong Xianxia standing by the demonic man's side, he couldn't help but tightly crease his brow. At the moment, the Ghost Spirit sect's young master and the gorgeous man were coldly staring at the masked woman and revealed a trace of hesitation. Although Fairy Nangong had already fought with a Ghost Spirit sect core formation expert and should be lacking in power, she had killed countless Devil Dao core formation cultivators while fighting for the masked moon sect before. It wouldn't be worth it if she were to go all out and end them all in mutual destruction. With that in mind, the two couldn't help but look at each other, neither willing to act first. That strange, gorgeous man gazed at the masked woman with a slight smile. If this were the past, both senior brother Wang and I would naturally flee at the mere sight of Fairy Nangong. But now, even if I wanted to let you go in consideration of the previous relationship between the masked moon sect and the harmonious bond sect, my senior brother Wang from the Ghost Spirit sect would still be unwilling to let the matter go. The gorgeous man spoke as if they were all on extremely familiar terms with one another and as if this were a matter they had already discussed, but he unapologetically pushed the Ghost Spirit sect's young master in front of him to act as a shield. When Wang Chan heard this, he grew furious. But he wasn't someone who showed emotion. He only coldly glanced at her before speaking calmly. I heard that the Harmonious Bond sect has a secret technique, the art of dark moon yin absorption. A male cultivator can use it to forcefully absorb a portion of a woman's origin yin through pair cultivation techniques. Although it doesn't absorb much, with Senior's core formation cultivation, it will be enough for this young Master Qian to break through his current bottleneck and reach late foundation establishment. The gorgeous man's expression paled slightly. He hadn't expected that his reason for bitterly pursuing this woman without end had been seen through by Wang Chan. He couldn't help but feel angered from the humiliation. At that moment, the masked woman shot them a resentful glare. She gritted her perfect teeth and spat out, "You're all as bad as each other." D. She raised her hand and an earth-shattering white mist of swordlight shot toward them. When Wang Chen and the gorgeous man saw this, they both turned pale from fright. The next instant, they had turned into a bloody cloud and a ray of light, respectively, in an attempt to hastily evade the attack. Chapter 360. Halfway to Calamity, Xianxia, who was standing by the side of the gorgeous man, was also enveloped by the man's rainbow barrier. In an instant, the three had hastily flown back. A spiteful strike from a core formation cultivator was not something the three of them could endure. The sword light filled the sky and closely pursued them for about 40 meters before suddenly vanishing without a trace. At the same time, the woman's slender body swayed as if she were about to fall. The ghost spirit sect's young master and the gorgeous man grew elated upon seeing this and turned their retreat into a charge. As Han Li watched on from below, his face stiffened and he subconsciously patted his storage pouch. The 13 red-line shadow chaser needles flew out, and he quickly drew them back with his hands. Even if he were to put himself in danger, Han Li couldn't allow Nangong Wen to wilt before his eyes. No matter how self-centered and cold-hearted he may be, regardless of whether or not he could contend with the ghost spirit sect's young master and the others, the entirety of his heart and soul urged him to act. Just as Han Li was about to act and release the flying needles to save the masked woman, the sky abruptly underwent a massive change. The previously wavering woman that was standing on the sword suddenly regained her bearings, and her eyes glinted with cold light. Wang Chan and the gorgeous man grew pale. They immediately knew that they had fallen for her ruse, but by the time they wanted to run away, it was already too late. The woman raised her hands and countless streaks of swordlight soared through the air and completely enveloped the three in blinding white light. When Han Li saw this, he felt relieved and loosened his grip on his flying needles. The sky shone with grey light from the masked woman's swordlight. A bloody cloud and pink light tottered within it like a small boat in a surging storm. However, they still managed to painfully endure. In particular, within the pink light, the gorgeous man and Xianxia released a strange azure-red light from their hands, offsetting the swordlight's attack. Han Li lightly wrinkled his brow and lowered his head in contemplation before silently disappearing. Meanwhile, the masked woman felt great worry. She was truly surprised to see that even though she had used a ruse to press the Devil Dao cultivators, her current attack was still unable to deal with the three. Not long ago, she had fought a great battle against a Devil Dao core formation cultivator. Her opponent had nearly succeeded in ending the battle in mutual destruction, depleting her magic power. Although she managed to escape further entanglements afterwards, her heavy injuries had been a cause for great concern. Even worse, her magic treasure, which was inseparably bonded to her soul, had suffered serious damage during the previous battle, leaving it unusable for the time being. Furthermore, because she was being pursued, she was forced to use a secret technique that greatly damaged her vitality to escape, forcefully drawing out a portion of her body's potential to produce a sliver of spiritual power. Although she had managed to throw off the majority of her pursuers, she hadn't expected that these three, who possessed exceptional devilish arts, would continue to pursue her relentlessly. Thus, she could only attempt to eliminate them. Otherwise, even if she were a core formation cultivator, she would be at their mercy once the effects of her secret technique subsided. The reason why she had stopped here was because her spiritual awareness had felt that there was a cultivator here. Although she didn't know who it was an undeniable fact that this person lacked the devilish aura possessed by those who used the techniques of the Devil Dao. Furthermore, this person was a mid-foundation establishment cultivator. Were he not a cultivator from a large clan, then he should be a cultivator from the other 5 allied sects. With nowhere to go and in a hopeless situation, She flew here with the intention of dragging that cultivator into this mess and possibly turning the situation for the better. But she absolutely didn't expect that this person's spiritual sense would be so strong. This person had concealed himself from far away without any intention of involving himself. As such, the masked woman could only confront the enemy alone and grit her teeth with aching resentment. But once again, a frightening development had unfolded before her. These 3 Devil Dao cultivators were extremely tenacious, and they possessed immensely powerful defensive magic tools. Even if she were to use the entirety of her remaining spiritual power, she wouldn't be able to kill them quickly. With regard to her high-grade talismans and impressive magic tools, they had been thoroughly exhausted in the battles many days earlier. Her heart sank as she felt her last remnants of magic power about to disappear. The Devil Dao cultivators that were bitterly enduring the swordlight felt its enormous suffocating pressure gradually weaken until it had completely disappeared. The 3 were stunned and immediately turned their gazes towards the masked woman. She blankly stood on top of her flying sword with dim, emotionless eyes while her body pitifully trembled. Wang Chan and the beautiful man looked at each other with feelings of pleasant surprise. But as they had just suffered from her clever ploy, they hesitated and didn't dare to act rashly. But at this moment, a streak of white light flew out from below like a bolt of lightning. In the blink of an eye, the white light had appeared in front of the masked woman. The silhouette within the white light embraced her waist before suddenly descending back down from where it came. This scene left Wang Chan and the gorgeous man bursting with anger. How could the 2 let such a rich prize be snatched out of their mouths? They reacted by immediately chasing after the white light with the full capabilities of their movement techniques. However, Dong Xianxia stood at her original location with an expression of shock. This was because that silhouette had appeared extremely familiar and caused her to unconsciously hesitate. About 40 meters below, the white light shot towards a dense forest. After it entered the forest, the light faded away to reveal an unremarkable male youth. As he tightly embraced the masked woman in one arm, he raised his head and expressionlessly looked at Wang Chan and the gorgeous man chasing after them. Although the masked woman lacked the strength to struggle from his embrace, her eyes were filled with humiliation and resentment as if she was scolding him. However, the youth paid this no mind. So it turned out to be you. It's you. Once they clearly saw the male youth's appearance, Wang Chen and the gorgeous man simultaneously yelled out. They had both recognized Han Li, whom they had each attempted to kill before. After glancing at each other in surprise, they charged toward Han Li while using their abilities to the fullest extent without any further hesitation. Wang Chan's blood cloud swelled and expanded to 40 meters wide in an instant. At the same time, its bloody scent grew much more intense and its pressure became astonishingly stronger. The gorgeous man coldly laughed, and a jade flute suddenly appeared in his hand. With a wave, a clear whistle sounded out, transforming his rainbow streak of light into a pink peacock. As he shot toward Han Li, Wang Chan closely followed behind him, unwilling to be second. Seeing that the 2 were so aggressively chasing him, Han Li finally revealed a trace of panic. He suddenly stomped on his small boat, causing it to release a blinding white light. It lightly trembled as if it were strung on a bow. With the Devil Dao cultivators' astonishing offensive, they had already arrived in front of Han Li and blocked off his path of escape. They now clearly saw that the masked woman had given up her struggle and that her eyes were filled with despair. This caused the 2 to feel much more at ease. It seemed that the female core formation cultivator no longer had the power to resist. In that moment, Han Li's panicked expression underwent a sudden change, and he revealed a faint, strange smile. When the 2 outstanding Devil Dao cultivators saw Han Li's expression, their hearts thumped heavily. The scene before them suddenly changed as Han Li and the masked woman turned into a cool breeze as if they no longer existed. Then, 2 huge stones appeared in front of the Devil Dao cultivators, causing them to dodge away in alarm. They couldn't help but look around in astonishment. What they saw caused their complexions to pale. They were surrounded by some kind of forest with countless towering trees similar to stone obelisks. They had been trapped inside of an illusory formation. Wang Chan and the gorgeous man were furious. Although the might of this illusory formation wasn't great, they would have to spend a good amount of time to break through it, giving their prey more than enough time to escape. As a result, these 2 young masters of the Devil Dao developed a bone-deep hatred for Han Li. Senior brother Wang, Let's quickly break out of this formation. Don't forget that my junior martial sister Dawn is still outside. With her cultivation, she can stall them for a short while. She will give us all the time that we will need." The gorgeous man suddenly thought of something and coldly smiled. Wang Chan's face grew cheerful for a moment, but then he spoke with doubt. "Ah, that's right. It seems this young master has forgotten something. That girl was once a Yellow Maple Valley disciple. Will she really block them?" The gorgeous man then revealed some hesitation and replied with uncertainty. "She will definitely act. After all, Dong Xiena has a high position in my Harmonious Bond sect, far greater than the status of an ordinary disciple that she had within Yellow Maple Valley. Furthermore, I, this father, treat her quite well.